Philosophers talk to our times. The brief future of history. I guess I hope it goes without saying, because it will be a paradigm of this series, that when humans have got rid of a belief in a very straightforward mystical God, one that worked by the laws only of magic and of incense, of the fear of the night, and all that was unknown, when they replaced their negative theology with reason. Science fiction obviously took the position of theology. It predicted what humans would look like when they had transcended their own humanity. Here was the Overman, or the Overkirk, written in its full glory. What humanity would look like in 250 years or more. And so since what? I think I'm going to blame Dune, actually. Humans have looked to science fiction for their godhead, for it is in the future, of course. We become as gods. And the infection has spread even to those pharaonic faiths that would claim to still represent the old religion of the unknown and the dark. I mean those tenets of Christianity, not tenets, those subsets of Christianity, sects, cults, that have confused deity with beam me up Scotty, whether I'm wearing clean underwear or no. Science fiction has invaded religion and the way we understand what it is to have a god. All that is, I think, just obvious. But it has very curious effects on human minds. Because there is a clear difference between a humanity in the future that we feel we must already be part of, a demand then for that future we have envisaged, and heaven, whatever that might be, or the wonderful medieval version that isn't quite heaven, where cheese just falls from the trees and wine and beer reigns. All that sort of stuff. It's got a different rhythm because it implies that humans have to do something. We don't get it for free, and yet we tell the stories for free. And the problem is, of course, about any good science fiction story, is that it creates a genuinely impossible future. Not only are the futures never of the near future, but the far-flung future. Oh, it's easier and more comforting, ain't it? But worse than that, in envisaging it, of course, it sets itself up as a beacon. A beacon that, of course, operates, as any physicist or philosopher would tell you, as a negative reciprocon, the limiting case of a negative reciprocon of what the future will be. What I mean by that is, our very ability to write a story about it, I tend to think, precludes its very existence. You either live in the Star Trek universe or you write about it. You don't do both. And why? Because you want to force the issue too much. And isn't that where we are? Isn't that the problem of that group of people who get called tech bros? Actually just unscrupulous ex-hippies who've turned into billionaires. Scratch a hippie, find a fascist. It was always what the punk said after all. Who, I have no doubt, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, however many years ago, you insert the figure, I think it's more like 20, no doubt thought that they were beginning the start of living in the future. The internet would be the future they had read about in books, seen in screens where men walked on Mars. That we would catch up with the Star Trek timeline and do the first power flight in Mars in their lifetimes. And from then, who knows? But then the rules of the negative reciprocon kicked in. A number so bizarre it can only be defined by what it is not. In case you don't know what it is, it's from Douglas Adams. It's not a serious thing. But it does really define how this works. Because the trouble is, of course, once you start looking for what those futures you think are your birthright, you miss the actual futures that you are in. And so we now have a race of tech bros who are a brace apart, who look always to those futures they've read about and demand that they are. I think that's one of the reasons that they are so committed to AI. I mean, beyond the fact that they think it will make them billions, beyond the fact that it's the next thing for the internet and gives them other ways to monetize it. I mean, actually, if you ask them emotionally, if you ask them in their intellect, in that remnant of humanity that is left even unto them, it is the idea that this was something that Star Trek actually had. This was something that the sci-fi books of the future had. Are thinking machines. And they have done it. And now nothing, absolutely nothing, should get in the way. Be it governments that need to be bought, or people who need to be ignored and replaced just by this thinking machine, which was always better anyway. And all that jazz. Because this was the urgent future they'd been promising themselves. They might not fly on Mars, because actually humans are not going to colonise Mars. We're barely going to manage to colonise the moon without losing too many people in the end. My own personal suspicion is it won't happen. I think the mechanics are too difficult. If you want my honest answer, if humans were ever going to colonise a planet, I actually think the only one that is viable is Venus. And you have, once you overcome the little problem, because it's warm enough and it's big enough and it's dense enough, you just have to cope. You have to be able to, in 100, 200, 300 years time, be able to get rid of the clouds of sulfuric acid and the rest. It's a far less problematic technical problem in the end than living on planets that are too small with not enough atmosphere. But be that as it may, that's just me having my own games with science fiction. The point is that urgent necessity, the urgent necessity to this future, of course, blinds you in the world that you're in. And we're in a world where resources are scarce. We're in a world where actually the logic of even the capitalist world we live in is decommissioning big power stations, decommissioning the big and allowing the little to flourish. I mean, for instance, solar power is a classic example. Yes, it has to be manufactured, the panels have to be manufactured. But once they're manufactured, anybody becomes a PowerPoint producer. Likewise, the logic, the creative power of the internet actually lies in that anybody can do it. Everybody does it. That is its power. And so it lies in decommissioning, in pulling apart currencies, in pulling apart knowledge. And so the future that we're actually opening up to, the really creative one, is miles away from the sci-fi, let's think about robots that actually think. It's that future it's that near future that isn't often written about. A future where folk can do their own thing, be thoroughly different, a little bit detached from states. I don't know that it makes good fiction. I often try to write it, actually. And I don't know if it makes good fiction. But that's the one we're moving towards. And of course, that's at odds with the tech bros. And it's at odds how they understand how the entire system should be moving towards the bit of this little lump of Star Trek they have promised themselves. And so they will buy up governments and ignore people. And also, in spite of being that generation that really do understand about climate change, that's what always gets me. It gets me, I don't know about Muckleberg, but the Google bros, back in the day, they actually understood about climate change and its potential danger. But because their little box of Smarties haven't helped solve it, they now ignore that fact. So you live on a planet there, not only does the forces of capitalism, insofar as they exist, probably at the moment, ought to, if it wasn't being rigged, help the little guys. But also, you live in a form of capitalism where the planet itself needs there not to be very large-scale energy production, where it needs to not be all about the big guys, but about little local solutions, helping little local problems. And what's more, we have the technology to do it. But we didn't write that science fiction. So we're not moving towards that future. Not if the tech bros can help it. And of course, they've bought up the government. They are demanding their future. And it gets even more complicated because, of course, the tech bro future, the future of thinking machines, is one that is easy to sell to investors. Why? Well, they've all seen the programs too. They all understand that sort of investment. They all understand that sort of future. So it becomes itself its own self-hollowing out future. A future that we can all agree on in terms of its vision. A world of thinking machines and of deep thought. The fact that it is actually impossible, in the same way that colonizing the moon is actually impossible, is of no consequence. These were always religious propositions. They were always ideas that humans promised themselves would be true, in the same way that they once promised themselves that you would die and go to a land flowing with cheese. It's of the same logic. Unfortunately, though, well, medieval peasants harmed only local environments with their lust for wine and cheese. We're more than capable of destroying an entire ecosystem and our position on it in the vision of this impossible future, the one our own vision has excluded. And isn't that where we are? The irony that we could solve this problem if we put the money and the effort behind it, totally solvable. Environmental collapse is not so far advanced that it couldn't be solved. Absolutely. It's all about, I would like to say it's all a political will, but that's a cliche. It's all about that future that has captured the imagination of those with the power to enforce it. And somewhere along the line, they've fallen in love with a different future. One they read of in books that is totally fictionalized and that our world cannot live. And that is our problem. What do you do about that? Do we quickly write science fiction books and give it to the tech bros and hope they read it and like it? Or do we start to sing our own, or do we start to invent new stories, to tire of this poetry of the past, to try to work out a new language, a new way to talk of the future, and perhaps even grow to inhabit it?